economic recovery long-lasting, government has announced to extend several social assistance programs up to next year. Coordinating Minister of Economic Affairs Airlangga Hartarto explained that government will still focus on COVID-19 pandemic handling. Airlangga also stated that the government will continue to maintain economic recovery by improving people's purchasing power. The main source of implementations is in the area of protections or social assistance. For instance, Family Hopeful Program, Basic Food Cards, Food Assistance in Jakarta and greater areas, Pre-Employment Program, Electricity Subsidy, and Direct Cash Assistance. Jakarta, Rahajo Pakmo for IDX Channel. And yes, viewer, the fact that government allocated huge funds of social assistance until next year is highly appreciated by the economic observers. It is assessed that social assistance fund can boost household consumption. Economic observer warmly welcomed government plans to continue social assistance program until next year. Even better, social assistance program range becomes wider as the time goes by, starting from small-medium enterprises assistance up to salary subsidy for non-state-owned enterprises workers. Core Indonesia's economic observer, Muhammad Faisal, said that the government's move is considered very right to encourage household consumption side by increasing people's purchasing power. However, Faisal also noted that government should target right beneficiaries because if government gives to wrong beneficiaries, it can lead to saving rather than spending. In conclusions, social assistance will not boost household consumption.
Konsumsi itu lebih baik ya, karena kalau diberikan kepada sasaran atau orang yang salah, ini kita khawatirkan alih-alih mendorong konsumsi, tapi bisa jadi malah mendorong saving. Oleh karena itu dari sisi pendataan ya atau pemilahan target daripada BLT ini perlu benar-benar diperhatikan.
Even so, observer hopes that social assistance can also be given to employees who work in the informal sector. The reason is many informal workers also experience lower income during the pandemic. Jakarta, Riki Anwardi for IDX Channel. On the other hand, the United Nations Development Program economists urge Indonesia to evaluate its social assistance program. The UNDP Senior Economic Advisor for Asia Pacific, Balas Horvath, on Friday said all governments need to review their expenditure, including social assistance program, to create fiscal space for additional welfare. Indonesia's government has allocated 695.2 trillion rupiah, equivalent to $47.6 billion to COVID-19 containment budget. Governments need to have a clear-headed review to their expenditure and revenue policies and get rid of inefficient policy to create fiscal space. In short, UNDP also asked Indonesia to eliminate ineffective program amidst rising need for social welfare to prevent further economic fallout from the pandemic. From all sources for IDX Channel. Stay tuned on market headlines because we will be right back after this quick break.
Proyeksi yang sudah ditetapkan begitu ya di tahun 2021, tanggapan dari Anda terlebih dahulu seperti apa ini Pak Peter?
Pertumbuhan dampak dari wabah COVID ini terhadap perekonomian Indonesia itu relatif kecil ya dibandingkan negara-negara lain.
Adi akan ada proyek bikin hunian atau tempat tinggal?
Konsepnya adalah membawa kemudahan masyarakat sekitar Jakarta untuk bekerja di pusat kota. Total saat ini Adi Komuter Property mengembangkan 11 titik ya. Kalau Mas baru beli sekarang mungkin udah ke 3.000 sekian pembeli.
Kita bisa mulai merasakan fase 1 di tahun berapa?
Di tahun 2021. bagaimana sebetulnya Menteri BUMN Erick Thohir dan juga Direktur Utama Krakatau Steel?
Dirutnya dan menterinya sama-sama kan milenial, harusnya lebih move on daripada apa yang sudah ada sebelum-sebelumnya.
Hello, I'm Clara Antawijaya. I'm associate producer and news presenter on Market Headlines. As Market Headlines starts at 4:30 p.m., which is in line with the closing market, therefore we summarize market conditions only for you. And my job in here as a journalist, I give concise and accurate news for the audience. And also, being a journalist is not only a job for me, but it is also a passion.
Welcome back to Market Headlines. The sluggish economy due to COVID-19 pandemic has not discouraged companies for conducting an initial public offering or IPO on Indonesia's stock exchange. This can be seen from 40 companies that have conducted IPOs until early September of 2020.
The sluggish economy due to the COVID-19 pandemic has not discouraged companies from conducting an initial public offering or IPO on the Indonesia Stock Exchange. The latest data shows that until early September 2020, 40 companies had successfully conducted IPOs. The Indonesia Stock Exchange admits that the interest of companies that wish to list their shares is still high. The high interest of companies to take the floor on the IDX can't be separated from the need for funding, which is an alternative source of fundraising apart from banking. At the same time, the Indonesian Stock Exchange strives to ensure that companies that go public are of good quality. In the midst of high interest in IPO, the Indonesian Capital Market Authorities, IDX, and Financial Services Authority, or OJK, stated that they are not only concerned with quantity, but also quality. The selection and inspection process is carried out jointly with the authorities at an early stage in both the primary and the secondary markets. From all sources for IDX Channel.
And yes, viewers, as an alternative in funding new sources of funding, IPO in capital market have become the main choice for many companies. And this is no exception in the midst of the harsh conditions like today, where the COVID-19 pandemic is pressing all economic sectors. And however, it has been noted that up to now, the company's interest in conducting IPO is still quite high. How is the data so far? So let's get into the first graphic, shall we? Through your screen, we can see that the number of companies that conducting IPO since 2017 to 2020. Here it is through the data. We can see that in 2017, there were 37 companies that conducted IPO, but the number one significantly jumped to 57 companies in 2018, while in 2019, it decreased only a bit by 55 companies that conducted IPO so far in 2019. And here it is in 2020, up until now, there are 40 companies that conducting IPO. And the closer to the end of September, the more companies listed their shares on the Indonesia Stock Exchange. And regarding this, Indonesia Stock Exchange said that the number of potential listed companies were pursuing listing of shares before the end of the third quarter of 2020, because the company used the first quarter financial statements as the database in the public offering, so the IPO process had to be completed as soon as possible. And meanwhile, even though the number of companies that have conducted IPO is approaching the positions of the end of 2019 in terms of value, it is still quite far, where in 2019, the total IPO value reached 14.78 trillion rupiah, even higher in 2018 of 15.67 trillion rupiah. So which companies that have conducted IPO so far? Let's move on to the next graphic. Here it is through your screen. We can see the graphic on the latest listed companies on IDX. Here it is. We can see Selaras, Citra Nusantara Perkasa. And moving on to BAM Business International. And of course, Kunia Mitra Duta Sentosa.
And these three companies has officially become the 38th, 39th, and 40th listed companies on Indonesia Stock Exchange in 2020. And regarding IPO, newcomer shares tends to experience a significant increase in price on the first day of trading in Indonesia Stock Exchange, including these three companies, where SCNP went up by 34.55%, BBSI that went up 25%, and KMDS that increased by 24.67%. And although many parties say that the price increase on the first day of trading tended to only last for a moment, at the same time, the Indonesia Stock Exchange stated that many IPO companies then continued the upward trend, which was supported by good company fundamentals. And apart from these three companies, let's take a look at the other companies that just helped officially become a part of GCI today. Let's see it through the next graphic. Through the next graphic, we can see the latest listed company on IDX that has a listing date on September 8, 2020. Here it is. We got Soho Global Health and Puri Global Success. And for your information, Soho Global Health stated that the IPO is a strategic step for the companies to strengthen its positions in the pharmaceutical and health sector in Indonesia. And the company revealed that all proceeds from the IPO will be used to strengthen the distributions business. And meanwhile, the other issuer in here through your screen, we can see we have also Puri Global Success, or Puri, stated that the proceeds from the IPO will be used to increase equity participations in the subsidiary to increase the land banks. And again, viewers, the increase in price was also felt by these two newest issuers, whereas Soho rose by 24% at the opening of trading, and Puri jumped very high to 34%. But once again, don't be just tempted by the potential for the high price increases. Investors still have to pay close attention to the fundamental conditions of the IPO companies. And yes, viewers, how many companies there are still in the queue for the IPO? Let's take a look in the next graphic. Through your screen, we can see the IPO queue on Indonesian Stock Exchange as of August 31st, 2020. Here it is. We got a bunch of companies for companies in the property, real estate, and building constructions, while two other companies in trade and service and investment sectors, two more companies in missionless industry, two more companies in consumer goods, and one company in the finance sector. And here it is in the midst of high interest in IPO, the Indonesian's Capital Market Authorities, IDX, and the Financial Services Authority, or OJK, stated that they are not only concerned with the quantity, but also with quality. The selections and inspections process are carried out together as the early stage in both in primary and secondary markets. And in addition, Indonesia Stock Exchange strives to ensure that the company that go public are in the good quality. And by looking at the data, hopefully it shows that all stakeholders in the capital market are still optimistic despite the pandemic hits Indonesia. And therefore, viewers, stay tuned on Market Headlines because we will be right back after this quick break.
Rangkuman sentimen yang berhasil dihimpun oleh tim redaksi kami, di mana 3 emiten asal Indonesia masuk ke dalam daftar 12 saham dengan tingkat keyakinan tinggi pilihan JP Morgan.
Journal of Medis menyatakan, potensi vaksinnya untuk mencegah COVID-19 menghasilkan respon kekebalan kuat pada semua 45 pasien dalam uji coba tahap awal pada manusia. Dari dalam negeri, Presiden Joko Widodo akan membubarkan 18 lembaga di bawah pemerintahannya.
Nama saya Devi Sanovel, jabatan saat ini di Idea Channel adalah sebagai produser dan sekaligus presenter program yang dibawakan saat ini dengan nama Idea Second Session Closing, terkait juga dengan kondisi capital market Indonesia dan perkembangannya dari waktu ke waktu. Dan saya sangat senang untuk belajar dan berkecimpung di berita ekonomi, khususnya di capital market. Senang sekali saya David Sanovel dan dapat hadir menemani Anda dalam program spesial dialog webinar on TV.
Setiap minggunya kita akan membahas tema-tema yang sangat menarik. Apa kabar ibu-ibu sekalian? Sehat Bu ya?
Salah satu ambisi daripada Kementerian Koperasi dan UMKM bersama Spesco adalah koperasi keren, baru, digital gitu kan, yang kita bisa IT.
Welcome back to Market Headlines. And yes, viewers, let's take a deep dive into today's capital market conditions. First thing first, let's take a look at the Jakarta Composite Index intraday movement. So earlier this day, JCI was open at the level of 5,232.92. And then approaching the closing time of the first session, the index was on the level of 5,238.54. And the index was showing strengthening trend by the second session's closing time. The index was closed at the level of 5,244.08. And in short, JCI went up 0.27%. And moving on to the sectoral movement, leading the dynamics of today's trading, we got constructions as the leader of the strengthening trend that went up 1.89%, MISC industry that went up 1.38%, and also the leader of the weakening trend, we got infrastructure that went down 1.08%, agriculture that went down 0.52%. And step aside, moving on to the top gainers and top losers, here are the key highlights for today's trading sessions. BMRI went up 2.14%, INKP went up 5.34%, SSIA that went up 6.12%, and BEST that went up 9.09%. And meantime, for the top losers for today's trading, we got PGAS that went down 4.07%, ACST that went down 6.34%, ENVY that went down 6.02%, and Medco that went down 4.42%. And next, we're going to see the intraday movement of rupiah towards US dollar. Earlier today, rupiah was open at the level of 14,798, and the rupiah was also showing weakening trend towards US dollar. And the rupiah was closed at the level of 14,819. In summary, rupiah went down or weakening by 0.71%. In order to maintain the company's performance, Perusahaan Gas Negara stated that it would continue to develop infrastructure development by adopting an efficiency optimization policy in the second half of 2020.
Perusahaan Gas Negara has a strategy to develop infrastructure development by taking efficiency optimization policies that are not directly related to revenue and pipeline reliability in the second half of 2020. Finance Director of Perusahaan Gas Negara Ari Kaban said that this was a response to the impact of COVID-19 and to maintain the company's performance. In addition, the company also performs cash flow optimization through prioritization of the investment budget. The director hopes that with all the steps, the company will be able to provide positive performance amidst the national and global economic slowdown. Meantime, for information, Perusahaan Gas Negara recorded a net profit in the first half of 2020 to only $6.7 million, a drop from the previous $54 million in the first semester of 2019. The lower net profit was affected by the triple down effect, which are COVID-19 pandemic, the decline in world oil and gas prices, and the weakening of the rupiah exchange rate against US dollar. From all sources, for IDX Channel.
Tiga Pilar Sejahtera Food confirmed that the company will hold a corporate actions to increase capital without preemptive rights or private placement of up to 1.26 trillion rupiah by December of 2020.
Tiga Pilar Sejahtera Food confirmed that the company will hold a corporate action to increase capital without preemptive rights or a private placement no later than December 2020. TPS Food President Director Lim Aun Sang said that the company will conduct a private placement by issuing 6 billion Series B shares with an exercise price of 210 rupiah. The number of shares issued is equivalent to 55.62% of the company's issued and fully paid up capital. In other words, the company will receive fresh funds of 1.26 trillion rupiah from the private action. The additional capital, according to the company, will increase equity by 186% from negative 1.32 trillion rupiah to positive 1.13 trillion rupiah. Meantime, for information, Pangan Sejahtera Investama is ISA shareholder with a portion of 32.77%. According to the management, the existence of Pangan Sejahtera Investama as a potential investor can provide assurance to the company to improve its financial position, especially to pay debts and financial obligations that will mature in December 2020. From all sources for IDX Channel.
Government keeps developing food security by creating Food State-Owned Enterprises Holding, which is expected to consolidate 9 state-owned enterprises in one group. And therefore, Raja Wali Nusantara Indonesia, as the holding company, has formulated strategy to develop food industry. Raja Wali Nusantara Indonesia has been appointed Raja Wali Nusantara Indonesia has been appointed as a holding company for consolidating 9 state-owned enterprises in the food sector. In the webinar sessions, President Director of Raja Wali Nusantara Indonesia, Eko Taufik Wibowo, stated that the company is now consolidating every sector in the food industry, starting from rice, fisheries, including salts. The goal is to create transparency of public needs, including improving the quality of food and easier access for the public to raw materials. Even though it is considered as a tough homework for fulfilling food security in the country, especially in the midst of pandemic, plus considering that Indonesia still has to import some food materials from outside the country. However, state-owned enterprises for food industry ensures that the national food security will be achieved.
Kami anggota klaster pangan itu ada 9 perusahaan termasuk RNI. Kami mendapat amanah untuk segera membentuk suatu kekuatan BUMN di mana bisa menjadi berperan besar negara khususnya untuk menjadikan pangan ini tidak menjadi satu isu lagi.
Let's step aside from the market conditions. As coronavirus pandemic takes a big role on current economic situations, here it is an update data about coronavirus globally. And the news close our market headlines today. Please enjoy our next program on IDX channel, the trustworthy economic business and capital market channel. I'm Clara Antawijaya. Have a nice evening and stay safe.